Hello, how are you? Good. It's 10:21. It's 10:28. Okay. 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 Sounds good.
The Facebook Live, you got it? Yeah. So,
Good morning, everyone. We will start in 1 minute. I invite everybody to come to the first two rows if possible, so that we do look like we have an audience. And I want to thank everybody for being here in person. IT, are you ready for today? Good morning. Thank you all for being here at the first of the 2025 speaker series here at the Valdry Center for Philanthropy on the campus of Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I want to first just thank everyone who has registered and those who are in person here. Thank you and welcome. And those of you who are online, thank you and welcome. My name is Terry Braden. I am the Director of Programs here at the Valdry Center for Philanthropy. And today's event is our first speaker series entitled, Are You Ready to Fundraise? Well, I hope you are, because we have a fantastic presenter today, and her name is Anna Barber of Barber and Associates. I'll let her share a little bit more about herself to you all momentarily. But let me tell you all a little bit about why this facility exists. The Valdry Center for Philanthropy is an academically based research center focused on philanthropic studies and nonprofit management. The VCP seeks to educate the socially conscious student, volunteer, and practitioner in the emerging field of philanthropic studies through exposing you all to economic, historical, and philosophical rationales for voluntary action in the local, national, and international arenas. You know, this building is the brainchild of Leon, Warren, and Virginia Valdry, graduates of Southern University and A&M College in 1955 and 1958. And we greatly appreciate their financial investment in their university to provide funding for the 2019 construction of this wonderful facility. Now, without further ado, I would like to present to you our speaker today, Anna Barber. Anna?
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me to Southern. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here today with you guys. Um, First and foremost, I would love for those that are in the room just to kind of go around really quickly, introduce yourself, tell me where you're at and what you're interested in getting out of this session, and then we'll get started.
Here I come. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Michelle Green. I teach Intro to Sociology here on the campus, but I also have a nonprofit, and I want to get whatever information that you're going to give me for preparing for fundraising for this year, because without the fundraisers, my organization does not exist. So we need to learn how to get more people to understand what we do as a nonprofit so that they can give back to the nonprofits so that we can get what we have need of for the masses of the people, because it's all about the people that we service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kaylin Gatlin. I am a senior here at Southern University. I'll be graduating in May. And what I want to get out of this session is just information for when I'm ready to give back to this institution.
Good morning. My name is Kendra Hendricks. I'm with Build Baton Rouge, which is East Baton Rouge's redevelopment authority, and we are hoping to gain some creative funding strategies.
My name is Talaska Montgomery, and I'm in the process of starting a nonprofit. So I wanted to get some information on the best way to go about fundraising and helping and serving other people.
And we have another guest here. Would you?
Good morning. My name is Janelle Watt. I am a chief operating officer for a company out of state, and I am looking forward to learning about ways to get my employer to give money back to causes that we should support because it enhances our the employees that we seek. A lot of candidates have a high turnover rate, and I think one of the best ways for us to reduce some of that turnover is to start looking in certain pockets of people and giving money and establishing those relationships. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. We'll let this be out.
Good morning. My name is Kobe Kelson. I'm a senior political science major here at Southern University. Here currently because I work for a nonprofit. I do manage a lot of the fundraising events that we do have as the executive director. So just here to get some different perspectives as we see the climate is changing around the country.
Thank you.
Right.
Anna?
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for everyone being here online. I know we didn't get a chance to go around and have each one of you introduce yourselves, but hopefully you will also be able to participate and get a lot out of this session. So today's topic is, are you ready to fundraise? And this is all about the preparation process to be able to fundraise more effectively. So again, my name is Anna Barber. I am the founder and principal consultant at Barber and Associates, which is a boutique fundraising consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. I've owned and operated the firm for about 7 years, and we work across multiple different sectors to help organizations build out their fundraising strategies and collateral to be able to fundraise more effectively. I also started a company called Ask a Fundraiser, which is an online platform that helps smaller nonprofits build their cases for support. Um, Basically, the work that we do is really focused in on helping organizations plan for success. And it's an area that has been generally overlooked when we think about nonprofits. I am also a 25-year fundraising veteran. I was a frontline fundraiser, major gift officer for multiple different entities. Most recently, prior to starting the firm, I worked at the Smithsonian in the Central Office of Advancement, where we represented all 19 museums and 9 research centers. And I had the good fortune of actually joining the Smithsonian's team as the first major gift officer they'd ever had. But I joined in 2009 when the National Museum of African American History and Culture was just getting started. And at the time, the National Museum of African American History and Culture had no site location, had no architect, had no collections, nothing. They had raised about 30 million at the time, and our total fundraising goal was 250 million. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as part of the Central Office of Advancement team, we could work on behalf of any museum or research initiative across the institution. And so my passion, obviously, was to be able to work on behalf of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And so they decided to send me out to California, where we had no prospects. We had no donors. We were starting a prospect base from scratch with a museum that had no facility or physical location, or any idea of what the project would be. But ultimately, over the course of the 8.5 years I spent at the Smithsonian, I was able to close 42 million in leadership and major gifts. 22 of the donors that I worked with made gifts of $1 million or more. 90% of those donors were first-time donors to the Smithsonian. And a majority of those donors were also African American. And then I worked for 10 years as a major gift officer in college athletics prior to that, which is really where I cut my teeth in fundraising. Because college athletics is not a fluke. They are able to raise the money that they're able to raise because of the strategy and the planning that they put into the process before they step out and start to have conversations with funders. So we're going to go through and kind of learn from the lessons that I have taken from each of these institutions. And I will say, the process that I'm going to walk through today is not something that I knew when I started my consulting firm. It's something that I had to learn. And the way that I approached consulting was I knew what tools and resources had been given to me as a frontline fundraiser that allowed me to be effective as a fundraiser. And so I was in the position where I needed to work with organizations to ensure that they had those tools and strategies developed to be effective fundraisers. And so this is a process that I think we overlook, generally speaking, in this industry. And so we're going to focus in very, very acutely on the planning process before we even step out and fundraise. So the agenda for today is simple. We want to start with a strategic thinking perspective and mindset. We'll talk a little bit more about the preparation process, the fundraising preparation process, and then we'll go into fundraising planning. And then there'll be some Q&A at the end, so feel free to gather your questions. I also welcome anyone that's in the audience to join in the conversation. Raise your hand, throw out a question. If there's a concept that doesn't really make sense or you don't fully understand, I'm open to having dialogue today. I've also placed a worksheet on everyone's chair. I think everyone has one that will allow you to start populating the answers to the questions that we will be posing throughout this presentation. So strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is really critical in the fundraising process because it allows you to really think that anything is possible, that your organization has the ability to change the trajectory of your community, of the society that you work in. So you've really got to begin to think big. So who in this room right now thinks of the classic definition of fundraising as the one that's here on the screen? The seeking of financial support for a charity, cause, or other enterprise. Who thinks that this is what fundraising would be? Okay, so a lot of people believe this is the classic definition of fundraising. I think this is what Merriam-Webster actually has put down as the definition of fundraising. But in my perspective and philosophy, fundraising is really about the work of your organization. It's about the vision of where you want to go, the work you're currently doing, and the work that you want to do in the future. It's all about what you are doing to transform society. It's not about necessarily the money. The money will help you get there, But that's not what fundraising is about. It's about your work and being able to communicate the work of your organization very clearly and effectively to your prospective donors and donor audience. So we want to keep that centered when we're thinking about the planning process for fundraising. So how many of you guys have a hard time thinking really big? Really, yes. I know there are a lot of us. I think in a lot of instances, we are constrained by our circumstances, our financial resources, our staff, whatever it may be. But we have to begin to think bigger about what the possibility is for the future and how our organizations will play a role in addressing those challenges in society. So we want to get out of this scarcity mindset and into an abundance mindset. So before we even go into the planning process for fundraising, we have to have an abundance framework from which we are planning. We have to believe that our strategies, our plans, our hope for the future is possible with the right planning and with the right resources. And from an abundance mindset, a leader must dream bigger than what they are asking for, what they are currently doing. If you are only thinking about what you are currently doing within your respective organizations, there's no opportunity for growth. You have to think far bigger than where society is today, where your community is today. And then think about how your organization is going to address some of those challenges and opportunities. So really starting this process with an abundance mindset. So I just want to give you some perspective to kind of get into an abundance mindset. Now, this data is publicly available. It's published every year. The Giving USA report comes out, I think, in June or July of every year, and it looks at the last year's philanthropic data. So in the year 2023, $557 billion was given away philanthropically. And I think it's important to understand the amount of resources that are given away in this country. And I can't surmise what's going to happen over the course of the next couple of years, but I would anticipate this number to actually increase significantly. I'm an advocate for this number at least doubling. And I think we might see that happening because there are enough resources to be able to generate that kind of philanthropic revenue. But I start here after talking about abundance to help you understand how many resources are actually out there and available for organizations that have a very strong, clear, concise, and outcome-driven plan. So Giving USA also breaks down the different categories of donors. Now, this is a big book that you can read, and there's plenty of data in here. I'm just going to give you the highlights. But where did that generosity come from? Where did the $557 billion come from? And a lot of the organizations we work with believe that it's corporations and foundations that make up a majority of the philanthropy in this country. This research, this data shows differently. 67% of the philanthropy that came in 2023 came from individual donors. Individual donors are the ones that are making the largest gifts. And so as organizations, if we are truly going to achieve greatness and be able to generate the philanthropic income we need, we are going to have to get comfortable with identifying and cultivating individual donors. 19% was given by foundations. 8% was given through bequest. So arguably, we're at 75% coming from individual donors. And if you're not familiar with what a bequest is, it's basically a gift that an individual decides to make after their passing. generally speaking. Not in all instances, but that's the general definition of what a bequest is. And then only 7% is currently given by corporations. And I think a lot of our organizations generally believe that corporations are the ones that make the largest gifts. And in some cases, they make large gifts, but it's those individual donors where you can really start to generate significant dollars. And in my career as a major gift officer, my portfolios almost exclusively were individual donors. I very rarely worked with corporations or foundations. We did have a corporate and foundation team because the Smithsonian had, pretty significant corporate and foundation donors, but I worked almost exclusively on the individual team, and I realized I needed to share that with people because people assume that as a fundraiser, I had only worked with corporations and foundations. So I can talk to you a lot about how to work with individual donors. So where did the charitable dollars go? They went to a lot of different places. But at the top of the list, as you can imagine, those dollars were allocated to religion. Second, human services. Third, education. Fourth, foundations, and on down the line. But as you can see, there are very specific sectors that donors begin to give within. And if you look at the sectors, I think all of your organizations will arguably fit into one of these sectors. So just know that there are a lot of resources out there for each one of your organizations. Yes. Yes. Churches, mosques, religious schools, Catholic charities. There's a lot of different types of religious organizations and religious affiliate organizations. And these are really broad categories. So if you go onto a website called Inside Philanthropy, they will break down all of the different sectors under each one of these categories. And you can see all of the different areas that fit under each one of these sectors. Now, these are not exact, and you can make arguments for how you fit into different sectors, but you also need to make sure that you have an idea, a very clear understanding of who you are and what you do, so that you can articulate how it aligns with organizations or funders or donors within each one of these sectors. So now that we've gone through where all the money comes from, how much money is out there, I just want to work through a couple of different exercises with you to help you move from a scarcity mindset into an abundance mindset. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we need to plan our activities, the work of our organization, from an abundance mindset always. We should never go into the fundraising planning process with the perspective of, how much money are we able to raise? That's not the perspective that you want to take when you start the fundraising planning process. You want to take the perspective of, how much money will it take to accomplish our goals? You see that there's a different framework from which you're approaching this work, because it presumes, in the second instance, that you are going to develop a plan. And you are going to think through how that plan is going to be executed to the best of your ability, right? Things change sometimes, but if you don't start with a plan, you don't start with the right fundraising goal, right? The plan drives the goal. The goal doesn't drive the plan. So we want to make sure that we're starting from the second perspective. Now, in the second instance, the scarcity mindset would say, there just aren't enough hours in the day to get the work done. Okay, well, you can take that perspective, or you can take the perspective of, let's engage more people and organizations in our work. Or let's plan for the staffing model that we actually need to accomplish where we want to go as an organization, right? So the plan, again, it presumes that there is a plan in place first. right? And then the last example here, scarcity mindset. Let's not add fundraising staff until we have the money. An abundance mindset says, let's fully invest in our fundraising infrastructure. Now, yes, those require resources, but if you have an executive director and you've developed a plan with your board, and in order for that plan to be executed on, you need certain staff, you need certain technology, you need development staff, then that's the dollar amount that you're going after. It's the needs that you have. So does this all make sense to people here? And if you just think about from your own individual perspectives, from your own organization's perspectives, where are you thinking about your organizations from a scarcity mindset? You've got to think about that deeply and then do some work to change your mindset to look at that problem from an abundance perspective. Okay, because this is going to be a critical framework to go into this planning process. So now now that we've moved into this abundance mindset, we're thinking anything is possible. Our organization has the ability to do, very ambitious things. Now you don't want to boil the ocean, right? Okay. I mean, you have to do things with some sort of realism. However, you really want to look at your organization and say, where are our strengths? Where are our unique assets? And then begin to think about, okay, that's where we need to double down. That's where we need to start our planning process from. So now that we're in an abundance mindset, we want to talk about vision and mission. And vision and mission are critically important before you start the fundraising plan because you want to have an idea of where you want to go in the future before you start building out the plan. So aspirational vision, the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination and wisdom. So I want you to sit and think about the work that you're currently doing and why you are doing that work. Now I want you to think about 20 years out. If you are able to accomplish everything that you plan and set out to do, what will the world look like? What will your community look like? What will society look like? And I just want to give you 30 seconds to actually create a vision within your minds around what the future will be. Not the easiest exercise in the world. But did any visions come into your mind that helped you think about and really visualize what a changed society would look like? Yes. Are you willing to share?
Because many times we have something in our mind, but we are scared of accomplishing it.
Yes.
And so when you ask us to close our eyes and think about it, I honestly close my eyes and I'm thinking about something that has been in my mind for a while. Looking at geriatric population and the senior population, I'm like, okay, you say this is the area you really want, but you never had the opportunity to think deep. What is it going, how is it going to benefit the society, the community? And then I'm like, okay, I think I have to have the mind of abundance seeker instead of having a mind of scarcity, in my mind. That one will scare you away from accomplishing your vision. But when you have the abundance attitude, it kind of, You're working to find out the feasibility study of your ideas and vision, and you're working out a good budget that you put on table and say, this is what it's going to cost me to accomplish this, and this is what the society is going to benefit from my community. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have a vision of the future that they would like to share? And you don't have to, because this is actually something that takes a long time to accomplish. It takes work and muscle to get to this. But you have to have a vision of where you are going. And you have to have it so crystal clear that you can communicate that vision to others and they can see that vision with you, right? You want others to be able to see the tangible vision of what you see for the future. And this is how I lead in all of my conversations with funders. It's the vision of where we're going. Now, it's going to take time and effort and planning and persistence to get there. I'm saying 20 years down the road. I'm not saying tomorrow, right? That's vision down the road. And then we pull it back. Well, before we pull it back, I'm going to give you the vision of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So like I said, when I started at the Smithsonian in 2009, Lonnie Bunch was the founding director of the museum. I think there were maybe 20 staff members at the museum at the time. They'd raised about $30 million to date. There was no site location. There was no architect. There was no collections. We had like one or two curators. We had we had one educational program that was already taking place. So there were some things happening, but like nobody knew that the museum was taking place. I didn't even know, applying for a job at the Smithsonian in the central office, that this museum was taking place. That's how early in the process it was. And then here we are, charged with going out and raising $250 million in private philanthropic support. Now, the project initially was supposed to cost $500 million, $250 million from the federal government, $250 million from private philanthropic support. And in order for us to get that $250 million in federal appropriations, we had to incrementally raise the private philanthropic support. So that funding was not guaranteed to us. And so here we are thinking, oh, we don't have any money and we need to go raise money for this museum. And mind you, this museum had been talked about since the veterans of the Civil War. There had been so many attempts at trying to build this museum in multiple different locations. So as you can see, some prospects and donors may be skeptical that this actually would come to fruition with or without the Smithsonian, right? But it was our job to sell the vision. And Lonnie Bunch created this wonderful vision of what this museum would mean to the country. And this museum was intended to tell the more complete American story from the African American lens. This is America's story, and this is a museum for all Americans. Now, you can read in a lot of different interpretations to this vision. You can read in that, America's story is not complete. That's not the way that we should be thinking about moving into our future. We could be thinking about it from the fact that certain stories were left out of the historical narrative, out of the historical arc. Some people can read it as the Smithsonian, as the nation's museum system, is not reflective of all of the stories that truly make up America. This vision gives us the ability to really think about the future and what this museum would do to help transform and change the future. And we had to lead with this. We had to get our prospective donors to buy into this and to understand where we were going and why this institution was so important, right? And we had to be persistent in helping them understand why it was so important and then the evolution of the process itself. But the vision was critically important. So as you think about your organization's vision, there are a few questions that you should be posing to yourself. One is, what is the problem or challenge you're seeking to solve? We must start with the problem or challenge. You could infer from the vision that Lonnie Bunch articulated what the challenges were. The historical story was not complete. The museum, the Smithsonian in its entirety did not reflect the full American story. We wanted there wasn't something in posterity to really help educate our children about what the story would be. The American story is not complete. So you need to think about, as an organization, what challenge or issue are you trying to solve? And then what is the solution your organization is planning to play in solving it? How are you best positioned? Where are your strengths and your assets? Because you want to lean into those strengths and those assets to begin to say, we're going to double down on these. We're going to develop even more ambitious plans around our strengths and our assets so that we can actually address the problem. And then if your organization achieves its goals, what will society look like? That helps you define what that vision will be for your organization. So take your boards, take your organizations through these exercises and answer these questions so that you can come up with a very clear vision of where you want to go. Because I guarantee you, getting the first $1 million or the first $5 million that I was able to close on behalf of the museum with just a vision before we broke ground, it required clarity in where we were going. Yes, please. Yeah.
Or was it just that time where it just didn't work out? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think there's probably, and I haven't done research on why some of the efforts did not fail. I do know that when the veterans of the Civil War proposed the museum, there was initial federal dollars allocated to the project, and then it got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and then it ended up being the Great Depression, and the federal dollars were pulled back. So I don't know how much, I haven't done research to determine, was there any philanthropic support, being proposed for that particular project? I don't know. I'm not fully sure. Not everything that you plan for works. And we have to be okay in sitting with that sometimes. But what we do need to know is that we need to develop a plan and then be persistent and dedicated in pursuing that plan versus letting it fall by the wayside and allowing yourself to go in so many different directions you can no longer focus. Because I guarantee you won't be able to execute if you have no focus. And then people will start to question the trustworthiness, the accountability of the organization itself. So sometimes you plan, you say, hey, it's going to be 3 years. And it may end up being 10 years. Sometimes you plan, you think it's going to be 8 years, and it ends up being 3 years. I mean, we did a project with the 80th anniversary campaign for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and we planned an $80 million campaign because it was their 80th anniversary. I'm not that novel in coming up with campaign goals, I suppose, but we were getting ready to launch the public phase of that campaign, and the pandemic hit. And then George Floyd happened. And then the 80 million was raised overnight. So sometimes it's a longer runway, sometimes it's a shorter runway. But the Legal Defense Fund had a plan. They knew exactly where that money was going to go if they were able to secure it. And so having that plan actually enabled them to deploy those resources very wisely because they already knew where they were going to go. and what kind of impact and outcomes it was going to have both on the organization and on the future of the country. So additionally, when you're thinking about vision statements, there's some rules of the road, I guess you can say, rules of thumb that you can think about, but ways in which that you can get these aspirational visions to be very clear and concise. So painting a picture that inspires people to act. So that's where I asked you to close your eyes and really visualize the future, because you want others to be able to visualize the future as well. Keep it short, preferably 10 words or less. I know that's really, really hard, but if possible, you want people to be able to repeat what your vision is. Write it in the present tense, make it specific to your organization, and really articulate the unique outcome that you are seeking to achieve. Try and use concrete language. Be ambitious, because we're thinking from an abundance perspective here, but you also can't make it seem impossible. There have been organizations that I have worked with, both as a board member and as a consultant, where they'll say, oh, well, we just want to raise, $50,000, but we want to do all of this. And then you look at it and you're like, well, where's the rest of the money coming from? Because you can't do all of this with $50,000. So you've also got to be realistic about what you're saying you want to do, because your budget has to match what you're saying what you want to do. Okay? So it can't be impossible. You're not trying to boil the ocean here. You're trying to actually accomplish something and achieve outcomes. That's the objective. But still, you have to go into it with an abundance mindset. And then simple is best. Whoop. So on your sheets, if you'd like to, just take a minute to write down a few words that may represent your aspirational vision, just so that you keep it front and center as you leave the space today. And you can work on it and refine it over time. So those online, I think you've also gotten worksheets. Feel free to jot down your aspirational vision or ideas around what an aspirational vision would be. Okay, not to rush anybody, but to move on to the next thing. Now that we have this aspirational vision, now we've got to talk about the work that we're currently doing. And we need to be clear about the work that we're currently doing. Because aspirational vision is like, this is where we want to go, but how are we operating now? So most people have worked on mission statements. Most people probably have mission statements. If you don't, it's an exercise that you definitely want to invest time in. A concise and powerful statement that guides your organization's strategic decisions, program development, resource allocation, and overall direction. So just getting very clear about what it is you currently do. There are organizations that we work with, because we work with small organizations, mid-sized organizations, large organizations. There are organizations that we work with that aren't able to articulate what they currently do. It takes them like 30 minutes to articulate their work. And it shouldn't take that long to articulate what you do. It needs to be quick and concise. So here are some examples of some mission statements. These are really concise, but if you read them and you think about the organizations that they represent, they actually align with the work of the organization. So the Smithsonian, it's a humongous organization. And the Smithsonian operates on a $1.2 billion budget, or at least it did 8 years ago when I left. But it's the increase in diffusion of knowledge. That's what the whole system is intended to do. The increase in diffusion of knowledge. The Human Rights Watch, defending the rights of people worldwide. That's pretty accurate when you actually think about it. And then AARP, this is like one of my favorite. I mean, this is so on point. To enhance quality of life for all as we age. It very much aligns with what AARP does as an organization. So I just want to give you quick examples to help you think through what your missions could be. And some of them you may not be able to get it this short, but I just want to give you some ideas. So here's just a couple of other rules of the road when thinking about mission statements. Clear and easy to understand, using concrete language. Keep it to an 8th grade reading level. Don't use big words that people can't understand or repeat. You want people to understand very clearly what it is that you do. Aim for a length of 9 to 15 words. You could see the other mission statements were even shorter than that. Avoid buzzwords, adjective strings, and fluff. I've seen so many mission statements that are like 2 paragraphs long. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what this is saying right now. I'm not sure what they do. It really needs to communicate what you do as an organization. And that's the last. Inform others about what you do and focus and guide internal team members and decisions. So you have your one cheater who's here. Feel free to write down your mission statement as it currently exists. And if you don't have one to write down, or you know you need to make some modifications or reduce or what have you, feel free to work on this later. I'll just give you 10 seconds or so to write a couple of things down. Okay. So the last thing that I'll share in this section is an equation, a fundraising and philanthropy equation. Your solutions plus donor funds equal social change. This is the definition of fundraising in my mind, almost. Your solutions, but you have to know what your solutions are. Plus donor funds, because donors are not creating nonprofits generally. They're looking for nonprofits and organizations to support. And that's what ultimately creates social change. But you want to make sure that your solutions and the donor objectives align. But you can only do that when you have a plan. You can't figure out alignment if you don't have a plan. So life is like a garden, you reap what you sow. I never said this process was easy. I was having a conversation with Chris earlier, and we were talking about Southern's campaign. And I was like, well, how long was the planning process leading into this campaign? And he said, well, we did our feasibility study in 2018. They're just now getting around to launching a campaign. It takes time to go through this planning process. And an organization as complex and important as Southern, they had to take their time and think about the challenges they were trying to address as an institution. They had to think about where their strengths and their assets were. And then they had to think about, okay, now what do we need to do to address the challenges that we've identified? And if you look at their case for support, which I was flipping through earlier, it's starting to demonstrate the solutions that the university has for very specific challenges within the community and the region at large. So it just goes to show that planning process is just critically important. And I fully expect and believe that the university will be successful in their plans. So now that we've gone through the preparation part, we've gone into an abundance mindset, we've built our vision, we've got clarity on what our mission is and the core work of our organization. And now we've got to go into strategic planning. And I call it strategic planning for fundraising. Normally, when I first started, I used to call it, we're going to do fundraising planning. And then I realized a lot of organizations didn't fully understand the work of their organization. And so or where they wanted to go. And so we had to build in a strategic planning process into our fundraising process because, like I said at the beginning, fundraising is not just about the dollars. Fundraising is about the work of your organization. And so we've got to get crystal clear about the work of our organization. So strategic planning for fundraising helps ensure that your organization fulfills its mission and vision, thereby effectively serving your beneficiaries. That's the ultimate goal at the end of the day. Really making sure that our beneficiaries are being served in the highest possible manner, in the most effective and supportive way. If our beneficiaries are not benefiting from your work, why are we doing this work? Right? So we have to make sure that the work is about our beneficiaries. So there's two reasons why strategic planning for fundraising is so important. One, it helps internally make sure that everyone is aligned around what the plan is. How many of you have been in organizations where there's not clarity or there's ambiguity around what the plan is? Yeah, that's not a comfortable place to be in. That's not the place from which an organization is in the best position to fundraise for, right? The clarity of where you are going is what allows you to fundraise more effectively, right? Because you've got to be able to be repetitive internally, and then externally, you want to make sure that everyone within your organization is sending the exact same message. So there's work to be done internally to ensure everyone knows where they're going. And then how they're communicating it externally needs to be uniform. There should not be variations in the way people talk about organizations yes, there is some personalization. Let me not say there's no personalization. Yes, there is. But you want everyone within your organization to be aligned with where you're going in the future and what priorities and initiatives you want to make investments in. And for those of you that have boards, you want your boards to also have some idea of where you're going. And with boards, I'll generally just give them two PowerPoint slides. This is all I need you to know. You can read through everything you want, but I need you to know these two slides. And we'll work with you on how to articulate these two slides and what it means for you as an individual. That's important. So there's some exercises that need to go into this. So the first step in the strategic planning for fundraising process, we've got to get step 1 down first. And sometimes people don't even have to go into step 2, but we got to get step 1 down first. We have to be able to articulate our core annual programs, our annual budgets, both from a revenue and expenditure perspective. So we've got to get comfortable with talking about our numbers. And I know that a lot of our organizations are not comfortable talking about numbers, but fundraising is all about numbers. So if you can't talk about numbers, you're doing yourself a disservice, even if they're not where you want them to be. You can talk about where you want to go in the future. And then you've got to be able to give your program rationale and evaluation. Like, what is the rationale for the work that you're doing? And how are you evaluating it? Right? So the first step is really just knowing what you're doing day in and day out right now, right? And being able to clearly and concisely articulate it. We'll go into a bit more detail. So core annual programs are the primary programs and services that your organization provides yearly to fulfill its mission. If you haven't done something in like 5 years, 10 years, not a core annual program. But there's so many organizations that I talk to and they're like, well, we did this like 6 years ago. Can I count this? No, actually, you cannot count that. You really want to count what you do day in and day out. If you don't have staff or budget allocated to a specific program, it's not really a program. So just to keep that in mind. Here are some examples of core programs. You know, we kind of broke it up by sector. You know how to define what your core annual programs are, but this is just at a glance for you to take a look at. And then there's an opportunity for you to write down up to 5 core annual programs on your one-pager. So I have also talked to many organizations that are trying to boil the ocean, and they will talk to me about 10 and 15 programs. And then they'll tell me, "Oh, and our annual operating budget is $150,000." And I'm like, "Something seems off here." That's not actually, that budget is not actually reflective of the work that you say you're doing. So there are linkages between your core annual programs and your budget, which is why you need to be able to talk about both. But I also only encourage up to 5, particularly for smaller organizations, because this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to plan for these programs. It takes a lot of work to execute on these programs. And it takes a lot of work to ensure that you are evaluating your progress towards your outcomes. How are you measuring your outputs? How are you measuring your outcomes? So I do encourage organizations to really lean into their strengths instead of trying to focus in on everything. And how many of us have ever heard, when you're at a job and they say, lean into your strengths versus your weaknesses. Focus on your strengths versus your weaknesses. Because if you focus in on your strengths, you go far further. If you're always focused in on your weaknesses, you have no time to focus on anything else because you're always trying to fix, trying to improve. Focus on your strengths. Figure out where your strengths are, focus there. So we encourage up to 5. 5 may even be a lot. From an annual operating budget perspective, so like I said, we've got to get really comfortable with our numbers. And this will happen over time. But donors and funders are fully expecting you to be able to talk about the numbers for your organization. So we really want you to have an annual operating budget that serves as a financial plan that outlines your projected expenses and your projected revenues. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I encourage you to go through this process. And I also encourage organizations not just to go through it on an annual basis, but actually think out at least 2 more years in the future. So we're doing a 3-year plan at a minimum, even for small organizations. And there's implications for that, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So we all know what annual program expenses are, but I'm going to separate out annual program expenses and overhead cost. Okay? So your annual program expenses include essential line item expenses associated with running and maintaining your programs. So how much does it cost to run your programs? I encourage you to put staff dollars into those budgets. Let's just say your executive director splits their time between running a program and running the organization. Put 50, if it's 50-50, put 50% of that executive director's salary in your program budget. And then the other 50% will go into your overhead cost so that you can actually give an accurate depiction of what your programs cost. So here are some examples of what would go into a program budget. There's lots of different things that can go into a program budget. Sometimes we miss some of this stuff because it's being given as an in-kind gift or service or good. But we want to make sure that we are articulating everything. And we do have a calculation or not really a calculation, but we have a philosophy on how to account for in-kind goods and services, because that should be in your budget too. Because we are not doing this work for free, right? There's time and effort and expertise that goes into this. So we want to be reflective as we can with everything in these program budgets. Yes?
So back to the budget slide you had.
Sorry, it goes a little slow. There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Yeah. I got a little latency. Legal fees, is that buried in one of them? You know, when it comes to
yes.
agreements and any
Well, generally
legal
that would be
fallout?
overhead.
Okay.
Generally, legal would be overhead unless it's specific to a program.
Okay.
So if
So
you,
lawyers don't read the agreements
they
before
do,
they
but
get.
that's generally considered overhead.
Okay. All
It's
right.
so unless there are legal, let's just say, I mean, you're in engineering, so let's just say um, you're working on a technology transfer project, or you're working on some intellectual property specific to biomedical engineering.
Okay.
Maybe in that instance, if there are attorneys that are specifically focused in on biomedical engineering,
Okay.
that would be a program expense. Like whatever you're doing around
Okay.
technology transfer, whatever you're doing around that intellectual property specific to that, maybe you can argue that it goes into your program expense. But generally, attorney fees would be considered overhead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
As overhead, they may be categorized under line item under your administrative expenses.
Correct.
For the program. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Now, these are not like hard and fast rules. You just need to make a justification for why you are putting things in different categories. One of the reasons why I'm differentiating between program expenses and overhead expenses is because a lot of organizations put everything into like their one budget, and then they aren't able to articulate what their actual program costs are, and funders sometimes won't fund overhead. They'll only fund programs. So you want to think about what you can put into your program budgets. Like, really, this is for staff salaries. I mean, staff. But there are other things that can go into your program budgets as well, because you don't want people to think that all of your salaries are a part of your overhead, because that's not the case. We actually do need people to execute on programs. And I think we've been lumping it all together for too long. And then funders are like, no, 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 we don't fund overhead. We don't fund overhead because you have too many salaries. Well, actually, I need salaries to run these programs. So that's why we're breaking it out this way. A CRM for what?
Let's say, oh, thanks, Chris. So we have Razor's Edge here, and let's say in the College of Engineering, I don't know, maybe I use Salesforce or something.
No,
Or
don't
something
use a
else
different database.
Yeah.
Make sure you're using the database that Central is using.
Okay, all right. I just put it out. Or there may be some other software packages, AI that's coming out that helps you go in and aggregate who's what where that we could use custom.
If it's not in a
Where would
program-
that fall if you have
This
certain
is just
software?
programs. Let's go to overhead. Let's go to overhead really quickly.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm ahead. Okay, sorry.
Yep, because yes, because this is not everything, right? Just programs, right? Okay, annual program expenses. No, that's forward. Hold on. No, forward. Forward. That's back. No, it's okay. One more.
Unique and specific to your program. If it's you use AI as your organization and a part of this, you may use it a little on this program, that's where you're making a distinction.
Correct.
Or if you've got something that is shared with another organization, then you need to, then you need to segregate what percentage goes to their
Yes.
item versus your overhead. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Try and be as transparent as possible when it comes to allocation of your dollars. So here are the overhead expenses. So this probably addresses your question, because you're probably like, we're missing all this stuff. It does go into your budget. But when you look, I'm going to show you some pie charts so you can see your budget at a glance. That'll help bring all this together. But you still have staff salaries and benefits that are overhead. Office leases generally overhead unless it's very specific to a very specific project. Event-related charges, basic utility software, travel costs, marketing and advertising, unless it's specific to a program, office and administrative supplies, in-kind goods and services. So that covers pretty much the remainder. And here's just a chart to show you how they overlap a bit, right? So some of these can be broken up, but you just have to understand what goes into your program budget, what goes into your overhead budget. And then you can break it up accordingly. Yes.
Do you recommend having one program budget for each program or one total?
One program budget for each total. One program budget for each program.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, because there will be funders that just want to fund one program.
Okay.
And so you want to give them that program budget. But I also think in giving any funder any budget, you want to show them the total budget too, and then pull out your program budget and say, if this is something that they're interested in, this is the program budget that we have for this particular program.
So you
or
recommend the total budget, and then on the second page, for this program, we have these expenses.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, because now you're building trust. Now you're building, trust in your competency, in your ability to understand how your organization operates. They are looking for this. Yes, perfect.
You separated miscellaneous expenses and in-kind expenses and services. So why do you separate the two of them? I'm like, they could have been, or both of them could have been under miscellaneous expenses.
They could have been, except for no one puts in-kind into their budgets. And it drives me up a wall, because I'm like, if you're not paying your executive director, you really need to be. But an organization will lead a funder or a prospective funder to believe that they're actually operating on $50,000 or $100,000. And I'm like, well, are you paying anyone? You're not paying anyone? Well, no, now you're really operating on $300,000, $400,000, depending on what the in-kind is there, right? Or I had an organization that we worked with. So they're an arts organization, and they support artists across Charlotte, right? And I kept seeing these humongous billboards for this organization all over the city. And then I would see these buses drive past, and I would see advertisements for this organization with artwork on it. It would say art pop, art pop. I'm like, how are they funding all of these billboards? Because they're telling me their annual operating budget is only $500,000. I know how much this advertising costs. So I went back to the executive director. I was like, how are you doing these ads on 500? I don't get it. And she was like, oh yeah, we get that. That's all in kind. We get it donated from the billboard companies. And I'm like, what is that? What is the value of that? $5.5 million on an annual basis. Guess what? You are not operating on a $500,000 budget. You're operating on a $6 million budget. 500 operating, 5.5 million in kind. Because if that goes away, you can no longer do what you're doing as a part of one of your core programs. Yes.
You don't do your in-kind. When you leave or someone else, you don't have a full picture of your operation.
Yes.
So then when it falls flat, you don't have any idea of how even if you knew. So you need to have that transparency. They want the visibility for those people who are giving you in-kind donations, and you need to have a realistic picture of what it takes, whether you're a small organization and somebody has donated the cost for the website that you can't live with. All of that matters. No one will know how to function or what it really costs and what you need to raise money for if you don't put that in there.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And sometimes, if you're planning out over 3 years, you should build some of your cost into years 2 and years 3. So if you're not currently paying your executive director or a program director, but your intention is actually they're not, build it into years 2 or years 3 and make that a part of your 3-year fundraising goal. Okay. So there's lots of implications for fundraising goal. So annual revenue, the total amount of income earned by your organization from all of its activities during a specific period of time, generally measured over your fiscal year. So let's see. Okay. So I like to break it up this way. And I think this is just a logical way to break things up. Philanthropic contributions, as you can see, they can come from multiple different sources. Corporate gifts, we have them broken up, corporate gifts and corporate sponsorships, because in theory, those come from two different budgets within a corporation. One comes from a philanthropic budget, one comes from a marketing budget, different things. Individual gifts, foundation grants, government grants. Earned revenue. Where is your earned revenue coming from? Do you have ticket sales, events, licensing fees, rentals, tuition? Know how your budget is broken up. Investment income. What's coming from investment income? What's coming from government appropriations, whether it's city, state, or local? City, state, or federal. And then what is the in-kind? What are the in-kind goods and services, supplies, volunteers? I have seen far too many organizations represent their revenue as if 100% is coming from philanthropy. Like they actually articulate it that way. And I'm like, that's not an accurate depiction of the way your organization is operating. And funders don't want to hear that. So like with the Smithsonian, I knew we're operating in a $1.2 billion budget. 70% of that $1.2 billion budget is coming in through federal appropriations that covers mostly salaries, development salaries excluded. Another 10% is coming from investment income. Another 10% is coming from philanthropic income, and another 5% is coming in through Smithsonian Enterprises. That's how that's what makes up that $1.2 billion budget. So I could articulate, we actually do need that 10% coming in from philanthropic revenue, because a lot of people were like, doesn't the federal government, support you guys in its entirety? So I needed to know my numbers to be able to explain the story of how the Smithsonian worked. And then I needed to know my numbers for the museum. It's the same thing with every organization. All of this works into your pitch, funder's pitch. Okay, so at a glance, I said I was going to show you some pie charts. These are like basic pie charts, but at a glance, doesn't this kind of make sense? You see at a glance, and you show this to funders. Look, not all of our program expenses are coming in from, not all of our money is going to programs. Not all of it's going to overhead. Not all of our revenue is coming in through one particular source. So this is just at a glance how to represent your budget and to help you as an organization talk about your budget as well. Okay, so write down your annual expenses and revenue. We just have little buckets there where you can write them down. We just encourage you to know those numbers. That's the most important thing, knowing your numbers. So step 2. So we got through step 1. We know our annual operating, how we're operating, right? We know our core programs. We know our budget. We know our revenue. We are clear. Now we want to go into strategic planning step 2. So what are the new and expansion projects over the next 3 years we need to make investments in? Now with big organizations like Southern, they're probably planning 5, 7, 10 years in the future. But for smaller organizations, can we get to 3? It's not easy, but it is helpful to have a plan for where we're going. And all of it should work in alignment with your vision and your mission. What are the projects you want to make investments in? And what is the rationale? What is your 3-year fundraising goal? Let's add up what your annual operations are going to be, plus what your new and expansion projects are going to be. And then we'll go into briefly covering gift pyramid, stewardship structure, and case for support. I'm not going in depth on this. I really want you to get the work of your organization down first. So new and expansion projects. What does your organization want to invest in over the next 3 years? Expansion is, we're doing these programs and we want to expand. Maybe we're doing a program in the 3rd and 4th grade, and we really need to expand into middle school or high school. That's an expansion. Maybe we need to build a new building, or we need to start a new daycare center. Those would be new projects. It just depends on what the challenges you're seeking to solve. And I added these slides, and now I'm like, someone told me it's going to be long. It was going to be long. So write down your new and expansion projects. We have room for 4. For small organizations, that is a lot. Because when we ask organizations to write their rationale and their evaluation mechanisms and all of this stuff, it takes them a very long time because we ask them to do it for each new and expansion project. It takes a long time. And most of the organizations we work with come back to us and say, oh, we're cutting it down to 2. We're not going to do 4 because that took too long. Because think about the execution of it too. You know, it takes time to scale. I'm a small business. I know. So when you're thinking about your new and expansion projects, here is the general process. So identify your needs. Let's just say you want to expand, like we said, you're in grades 3 and 4, you want to expand to grades 5 and 6. So what are the needs that you have to expand? Do you need new teachers? Do you need new space? Do you need technology? Do you need new lesson plans? What do you actually need to accomplish these new projects? Then we want you to itemize your needs. And then this is the most important. Well, no, they're all important. But number 3, research your cost. Do not pull figures out of the air and put them down. Like, people will know that if you put a salary down for a teacher at $150,000, that's probably, unless it's highly specialized, that's not accurate. So research the cost so that you're actually coming up with the cost of what your budget should be. And then that's how it establishes your budget. Okay. So at a glance, I love these at a glance things because this is how you want to present your information to funders. At a glance, at a glance. Everything is at a glance. You've done an enormous amount of work, but the way you're presenting it to funders is at a glance, at a glance, at a glance. So here we have our annual programs, and we have our budgets for each of our 3 annual programs in this case. And then we have 2 new projects that we want to make investments in. So we've gotten to a 3-year budget here of $1 million. So now we're saying, oh, we need to think about raising $1 million over the next 3 years. Now, this is simplified, okay, because this is not accounting for earned revenue and all that other stuff. But in theory, we're trying to raise $1 million. So then we go into a gift pyramid. So this is development speak. But I think it's important to understand. So this is what we call a gift pyramid. And this is where we start getting into strategy around fundraising. So if you have a $1 million goal, put it into a gift pyramid and break it up by the number of gifts that you need to reach that $1 million. And then when you're looking at fundraising, you want to start at the top of the pyramid. Because if you start at the bottom, the likelihood of you actually reaching your goal is nil. So spend the time to raise that top level gift or the top 2 level gifts first. Because before you go into the implementation of this thing, try and get a majority of your funds in, committed. And then if you plan out over 3 years, guess what? Now your donors can give over 3 years. So what a $100,000 gift would be in 1 year could be $300,000 over 3. All right. And then just know that you need more prospects than you need gifts. And then I also encourage people to prepare stewardship structures before you start the fundraising process, right? We use stewardship very highly effectively in fundraising. In college athletics, at the Smithsonian, at Southern, I know I've seen the names published, but think about opportunities for engagement for your donors. So at certain levels, they get different experiences with your organization. I fully believe in also offering experiences versus tangible physical things. Because what donors actually want from you is to know your program and your work more. They don't care about a t-shirt, they don't care about a pin, they don't care about all that stuff. generally. Some do. But if you can have a meeting or a VIP reception with your executive director for your top level donors, no gala, just we're just going to do a small reception for our 500,000 or 100,000 and up donors to hear insights from leadership at your organization. That is so meaningful. Or if you have a professor series and all of your donors at 10K and above get to zoom in to hear this lecture series, that's a great benefit. And stewardship is good for many things because one, it gives you levels to start talking about with your donors. Two, it standardizes your engagement with your donors so you don't have to do engagement all over the place with every individual donor all the time. They're giving over 3 years. Once a year, they get whatever at whatever level. Everyone gets it. They get an invitation. It's just put it on your calendar. You know it's going to happen. So anyway, yes.
Yeah, I like this. Oh, thanks, Chris. I keep forgetting. So, so I'm just thinking about corporate, like IPO roadshows.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever, is that something you've ever experienced, and does it fit in the stewardship where you go to meet with the donor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at their house or city, whatever, and have an engagement that way? Does that fit in there as like a,
It depends on if you
am I
if you're
saying that right?
doing
You follow me?
cultivation or stewardship. So stewardship is only for donors that have made gifts already. Yes, you can do stewardship in different cities. Yes, you can engage people in different ways, but stewardship is not for cultivation generally. There's a fine line. There's a fine line because you can use it for both, kind of, sort of. But let me give you a really cool example from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So as we were leading into the grand opening, we had very specific levels, and I'll show you the levels later in the next slide, and then we're almost done. So our top levels were the founding donors at $1 million plus. And when we were leading into the grand opening, we started publishing what the grand opening activities were going to be. And one of them for our founding donors was a party at the White House. And then for our major contributors at $100,000 was a concert at the Kennedy Center. And it was like the most amazing concert ever. And then for donors at $25,000 and above, you got your name on a donor wall within the museum. So people were clamoring, like literally clamoring to come to the White House. Like I actually got calls from people I've been cultivating for years. And I'm like, oh yeah, now you want to call me? But I'll take your $1 million. I will take the $1 million gift. Or, to get on a donor wall, we had so many inbound calls leading into the grand opening. Now, not all of the hard work we had to put in leading up to the grand opening, but as we were getting to grand opening, calls off the charts with $25,000 gifts. I've never had so many inbound calls with, I want to make a $25,000 gift. I want to make a $25,000. Okay, this is great. All of our staff, not just me. But we had stewardship. We had our levels defined. We had benefits codified. Like we knew what we were doing. And we were also creating a network. We did that highly, highly, highly effectively. So this is really basic, but I just wanted to touch on the importance of something like this. Correct.
Okay, that they want experience like that, not
They
just
want unique, one of a kind of, experiences with others that are supporting at the same levels. When you start to bring those types of things together, like we were bringing like CEOs from the same industry together for the first time. They had never met each other until the museum brought them together around a founding donor event. That was powerful. We were building network. We were definitely building network, but we did it with the steward. And this is what athletics knows how to do really well. Nope, you can't sit in the lower bowl. Like at Michigan State, when I was there, you could not, when I first got there, to sit in the lower bowl, you had to be giving $25,000 or $2,500 plus your season ticket. But then there was so many $10,000 annual donors, whatever. And there were no more lower bowl seats, so we had to reseat the entire arena. Well, now only donors at 10,000 and above could sit in the lower bowl. You know how many people jumped up to $10,000 to get seats in the lower bowl? This is stewardship, right? But I can talk to you about this because this was drilled into my head. Like I can tell you every job I had and what our stewardship benefits were and what our campaigns were. And then I am so proud of the museum and for the people that supported it. And I always want to give a shout out to the donors that made this institution possible. But this shows how stewardship will work. So we had no donors when we started in 2005. Well, really 2003, but 2005. By 2016, we had 135 donors at $1 million plus, 90% of which were first-time donors to the Smithsonian. And it was evenly broken up between individual donors, corporate donors, and foundation donors, which is unique. But of the 42 donors that were individual donors at $1 million plus, 80% were Black. Most people you have never heard of, never even heard of. 110 major contributors. Obviously, we could have done more work at this level. 354 2015 societies, 770 ambassadors. And the reason why I'm proud of the ambassadors is all of those donors were under the age of 40. All of them. And we started this program in 2013. And by 2016, we had 770 of them. So don't overlook the younger donors. And then we had over 200,000 members. Our annual giving campaign was like a little bit off the charts. I'm sure everyone here has gotten a mailing from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And ultimately, we raised 405 by December of 2017. So I know that this is not necessarily part of the presentation, but I just like to throw it in there to show like how levels can work and how you can summarize very quickly. I think that is it. Oh, case statement.
Remember, come get the mic. Did you have any international donors for the African American
Not
Museum?
many.
And how did that work? Okay.
Not many. It was mostly US-based donors. Yeah, not many. There may maybe one or two that were actually headquartered in the United States, but we didn't do much in the way of international fundraising. So all of this gets tied into a case for support. And these are the elements of a case for support. And I'm just going to show you like another snapshot overview of what a case for support can look like. We created one called AI for Kids just to give people an example. And let's see. Okay, I don't know. We'll be done by 12, I promise. If I can move to the next slide. Okay, AI for Kids. This is an example of a case for support. So we wrote this because we just wanted to show people what it could look like. Oh, it's not flipping. Okay, flip. So you can see our story, our vision, our mission, our core annual programs, the call for more, our new and expansion projects, our budget, success stories, statistics, contact information. And I saw this with Southern's case for support. You want to try and have something like this as a leave behind with donors. And then when you pitch your case for support, we've gone through all the elements in this presentation. Next slide. We encourage everyone to create a 5-minute pitch. Work on it with all of these elements. So name, history, mission, vision, uniqueness and impact, annual budget, core annual programs, new and expansion projects, total fundraising goal, methods of giving, how do you accept gifts, donor benefits and recognition. And then if you're actually pitching, don't forget to get the number out of your mouth. Sometimes we forget that as fundraisers, and it's not always comfortable. Even for me, I've had to suck my fear into the pit of my stomach on numerous occasions. Okay. And so we do have a tool where you can learn more. If you are interested in just getting on our mailing list, check the QR code. We send out helpful hints every week just to help you think about what you should be thinking about when you're thinking about fundraising. So this is to join our email list. And we're pretty much at the end. So I know you guys have been fantastic with questions and comments throughout. If there are any others, please let me know.
I did want to
Yes.
give some comments that came in online.
Yes.
C.S. Sherman says that I'm a member of a small but mighty local alumni chapter. I'd love to get some funding ideas and tips to share with our leadership. And he also added, I agree scaling up my ideas is a big problem for me. Miss Randall on Facebook says, this is great information. Yes, it's important to research your costs. Mr. Easley, who's a colleague of mine, says, establishing budgets before program implementation is crucial to any programming, especially those funded by fundraising revenue. And he emphatically, in all caps with an exclamation mark, says no gala.
Correct. Yes.
And Dr. Kendra Stewart wrote great information. But that's all the comments we had for online.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. Yes.
Is it possible you can email this PowerPoint to us?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
I said, is it possible for you to email this PowerPoint to us?
Yes, it will
Okay.
be emailed
Thank you.
to all registrants.
Yeah. Need that.
So thank you so much for coming. It shows your commitment to making sure your organizations are fundraising effectively. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to have any conversation afterwards.
Much on point that I am so grateful to be here today, that it will help me improve in my nonprofit, and it would also help me be able to be a better instructor to show my students that they need to donate to give back to the university. So I thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Yes, a copy will go to all registrants. Yes.
I want to thank everybody for being present today, and we also want to thank Miss Anna Barber for coming way down here. And we do have a gift to present to her. Unfortunately, it's locked up at the moment, but I know what you saw in the lobby, which is a mural on the wall of the bluff, and you will get your own personal bluff frame shipped to the location of your choice. So normally we bring the small example to share with you, but I wanted to just let you know that's what will be forthcoming, and we greatly appreciate what you have provided to us today. We've gotten some messages, and I've gotten a couple of text messages that they would like to see the next level higher than this, because what we know is, as small business owners or those who want to become startup entrepreneurs, that this was great for that first level, but they have asked, what's next? What's the next level? And so I know that you have that experience, and we've talked about series. So we have a speaker series. It doesn't mean that the speaker needs to change each time. If that speaker can provide levels of information that helps us all to grow, and I see some faces and some heads nodding here in the audience, that they are definitely interested in us returning you specific, of course, because of this great presentation, but it's letting us know what you all need. In philanthropy, it's a wide range of opportunities for everyone all over. And we will send you the PowerPoint with our evaluation to those who are present today. Those who are online, if you would please email us to let us know that you were in attendance today, so we can share with you the startup presentation that was provided here today. It's important that you all sign up and register and be present. We thank all of you for coming here. We had a good crowd here today, and I know we had over 25 people online, and we thank all of you for coming. But I must thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for funding a grant for the opportunity for the foundation, Southern Foundation, to provide no-cost series such as this for this year. So it's important that in philanthropy that you do still provide resources to help us to prolong the opportunities that we're sharing here today. So thank you all. I again. I am Terry Brayton with Southern University System Foundation here on the campus of Southern University and A&M College, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, at the Valdry Center for Philanthropy. And we have had a great presentation from Anna Barber, and we'll see you in the September event. Thank you.
Just real fast, we did get some comments from YouTube. Laquita Thomas said, "Thank you very much for a great session. This would definitely assist many of our alumni chapters across the country. And please don't forget us about you on YouTube." So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that.
All right, thank you. Thank you. We have light refreshments for those who are here in attendance in the one of our classrooms. The facility is available for external leasing, and you can contact our front desk for those services. Thank you. Have a great day.